So, the topic of today's conversation is really charging more for your expertise. And this comes from a lot of my experience in the past year, just really struggling with pricing and understanding how to make this business something that is profitable and make this business something that I enjoy doing. And a part of that has been understanding really about how pricing works, because pricing and thinking about pricing also brings into the conversation this ideas of what am I worth? Do I deserve this? How do I feel like I've earned this? And maybe near the end, we can talk a little bit about that as well. So the overview is going to be three things, right? If you want to charge more, it really helps to be a thought leader and build proof. If you want to charge more, it's very important to build a sales flywheel and understand sales a little bit better and ask better questions. And then ultimately, your ability to charge more is going to be about how accountable you are for the final business outcomes. And we're going to go over these three ideas, and then I'm going to share a little bit about how I've applied this in even just the building of this course, right? Because I think building a course effectively is charging for your expertise. So my background has been mostly in machine learning, right? So I saw a lot of the research in computer vision and recommendation systems. And 2 years ago, I basically had this hand injury that prevented me from typing as much as I used to. And so as I pivot from learning how to be a good developer and a good technical engineer, learning the side of consulting was very difficult for me because I was always someone who just did the work and didn't have to think about sales and marketing. But now I've really successfully grown out this business. I've been doing a lot of rad consulting with a lot of different companies that I think some of you will recognize, and I just want to share what I know. And just an example, here are some companies I've been working with in the past. So I've worked with companies like Zapier and HubSpot, some larger companies like Interpret, as well as some smaller companies like New Computer or Limitless AI. You might actually recognize some of these companies. And the reason I did this, and I think the reason many of you also want to do consulting, is primarily because it's very exciting in the beginning, right? You're just working on many projects, many different verticals. You get to develop both hard and soft skills. And on top of that, you get to, one, monetize your expertise, and two, get time freedom when you want it. And obviously, when you start out, when you start working, it's going to be very long hours. Like the first 3 or 4 months, it was very difficult. But once you plant the seeds of how you think about content and how you build proof, things get a lot easier. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how that feels when you hit the inflection point. And so I just want to share my first pricing error before I go with that. The first consulting job that I had was basically a director of mine. And this director knew that I was not working that much and wanted to see if I had some free time. And I said, sure, yeah, I'll help out. And they asked me, okay, Jason, this sounds really good. We'd love to do some kind of hourly engagement with you. How do you think about fees? And nervously, I said, oh, maybe 150, 170 an hour. I'm not really sure. And within 2 seconds, they just go, great, 170 is totally fine. Just send me the paperwork. We'll get you sorted out. And when that happens to you, you basically know that you charge too little, right? I didn't even give them permission to give me more money. They just felt bad and picked the highest number, right? And that will be something that happens way more often for all of you, I'm sure, where you just give a range and they're just okay with it. And that's when I realized I really needed to figure out how I think about pricing, right? And the advice I always hear is pretty bad. They're just like, oh, Jason, you should charge $1,000 an hour. You should just look in the mirror and keep doubling it until you feel uncomfortable. But that advice is really hard to implement. It does not feel very grounded. And a lot of the earlier contracts I work with are people who knew me. They were an old director, an old coworker, an old manager. It doesn't feel right. Just, oh yeah, I charge $1,000 an hour. Now I've been able to charge $2,000 or $3,000 an hour, but it's not really by the hour. And that's one of the mindset shifts I really want you to think about. And so the goal here is not only to give you feedback, but give you feedback from my firsthand experience, my failures and successes, as well as all the hours I spent just studying this, right, and just struggling with it. And ideally, because I'm only probably 1 or 2 years ahead of most of you guys, a lot of this feedback is going to be very helpful and grounded in some of my own experiences. And early 2023, most of my work was about $170 to $250 an hour. And tracking hours was a pain. You cancel a meeting and you feel like you're asking them for money to reschedule. It doesn't feel very good. Now in 2024, near the end of this year, most of my engagements are between $50,000 to $100,000 per engagement. And some companies pay 50% upfront and 50% on the back end. And a couple of companies even pay 85% upfront because I offer a 15% discount if paid upfront. The average engagement is about 3 to 4 hours long, and some of the work time commitments ends up between 1 to 4 hours a week. And so this is a very big shift in how I've thought about charging for the services I provide. And when you think about this, I think the first question most people ask is, how do you actually get customers, right? And there's only really 4 things you can do to get customers. There's warm outbound through things like referrals and you just talking to a friend. There's cold outbound when you send a bunch of emails using like AI services and fill up their spam inbox. There's free content and there's paid ads. And obviously, the first company I worked with was an old director. That effectively looks like a warm outbound. Cold outbound is something I'm not most experienced in, and it's very successful for agencies. But between free content and paid ads, you're going to realize that free ads, free content is the most effective one for those who are experts, right? Because buying ads is something I can do now for like the newsletter or for courses, but free content is where it really sticks. And the thing I really want you to think about, and this is the one thing I want you to remember through this entire session, is this idea that the content you create is the sawdust of your expertise-based consulting. So the idea is that if you think about a lumber yard, the first lumber yard, they're just selling lumber and they have all this waste product. And it turns out that if you collect this sawdust and you turn it into particle board, that industry is as large of an industry as the sawmill, right? And even now at the end of 2024, my writing and sort of education business is as big as my consulting business. It takes a long time to spin up, but once you are able to do that, it's going to be very helpful in both getting leads, but also thinking about building out a portfolio of products across different price points. And this idea that the content is the sawdust of expertise is relevant if you're actively consulting, because if you're helping people now, you should be writing about it. If you're working a day job and want to prepare yourself, you should probably be taking the time and say, you know what, I can start writing about my expertise while getting paid. And if you want to change how you write to charge more, again, all you have to do is change how you think about writing, what kind of things that you write about, and figuring out how we can capture that value. And this is relevant for any business as well. So I've also helped companies and agencies figure this out, because ultimately writing is the proof that you know what you're talking about, and everyone needs more proof. If you think about what are the best ads, for example, the best ads are ones that have testimonials, that have before and after pictures. And that's what's really going to help you understand and close a lot of your leads. And good content also addresses a lot of the pain points that are issues for businesses, right? Good content can help you figure out who you're writing for and who your customer is. Good content can help you generate leads. And practicing writing will help you pitch better and capture case studies. And lastly, as you start writing about this content in a way that is more outcomes focused rather than inputs focused, those same skills will take you to write better proposals, and those proposals are going to give them permission to pay you more. And so the first thing I really want to talk about is this idea of being the thought leader and building proof. So there's two things you have to do when you think about writing, right? The first one that is really important for the sales process is focusing on outcomes, not inputs. And the second thing, which we'll talk about later, is demonstrating your ability to be an oracle. And the reason we want to focus on outputs and not inputs is because ultimately you want to be charging for the value you create, not your labor. So if you are writing about the inputs, you will be seen as someone who is paid on inputs. The second thing that is a big mindset shift for me, at least, was understanding that businesses are looking for a return on investment. And again, that is an outcome of the problem that you solve. And lastly, as you practice writing, a deep understanding of the desired outcome changes how you will eventually approach sales and present proposals. And we'll talk about this at the end. And so one thing that I really want to challenge you today with and think about is, what kind of content do you actually write about? For example, I think a lot of technical blogs write about things like how to build a caching layer, or maybe a blog post on how I conducted 5 interviews and what I learned. But if you think about the outputs, the same blog post with a different title, with a different intro and a different conclusion could be about how to improve performance of your services by 20%, how to attract and hire great talent, right? So even just changing the title can help you be responsible for something very different in the process. And if you're already consulting, then you can write a bunch of articles about the questions you get through your consulting, right? You can write about open source tools that you've built or ship prototypes, and write about what you've learned and what kind of problems you had to solve, right? And with that, you can collect testimonials and proof to put that on your website. If you're starting out, one of the things I did the first 3 months of consulting was just taking a bunch of free calls. And I would just mine these calls for different ideas and different blog posts. And what I would do is I would use a bunch of different tools like Circleback and Spiral Computer and Claude projects to basically help create ideas for blog posts. And then lastly, you just got to make sure you publish a lot. In the full course, I'll actually talk about most of my workflows and some of the prompts and projects I use to do this automation. Now what happens is every time I have a meeting, I have an LLM propose blog post ideas and propose tweets and different content that I can test through different platforms. And learning to write about your expertise, again, I'm going to just repeat this over and over again across this entire conversation, is understanding the desires of your customer and being persuasive and showing proof. And then what we'll talk about in the course will be around specific ideas on how we write different hooks and different frameworks on how we actually think about writing. But I'll give a preview of AIDA in a bit. So once you have this content and once you're focused on writing about the outputs and the outcomes of your skills, then you can start building out a sales flywheel, right? Because as long as you write content that has a call to action, which might be book a call with me, let's have a conversation, let me help you see if I can answer some of your questions, then that's when people come in through the door, and that's when you can think about selling. And when the content pipeline works, sales feels very different. So in the beginning, a lot of it has been, hey, so do you want help with your AI business? Can I help you solve this problem or that problem? But near the end, so almost 1 year into writing more content, a lot of my conversations feel like this. They just say, hey, I'm the CTO of this company. I don't really know who you are, but a couple of your blog posts have showed up in my Slack for the past couple of months. And I finally clicked your blog post and I realized you were available for consulting. I don't want to keep paying my engineers to Google the stuff you wrote for free. Can you just help us out? And the idea is if you have a large library of proof and of evidence that you know what you're talking about, what I often do is I just say, oh, if you're running into this problem or that problem, here's another blog post you can read before we actually start an engagement. Here's something else that I can help you with. And at some point they'll go, I just want the answer. I just want to be able to buy my team's time back and start moving forward. And what you're going to realize is if you write content that is lower level and more inputs focused, you're going to attract a lot more ICs. It's going to get much more views, but they won't be the the buyers of your service. Instead, if you write outcomes-based content and you write towards folks who are thinking about building versus buying and decision makers, then it becomes a point where they are thinking about how to best allocate their resources and make investments in their business rather than just thinking about, okay, how much does something cost, right? What am I going to get out of this? And as you target this smaller TAM of readers, right, you want to make sure you have both. As you figure out the outcome-based writing, the conversations will change. It's going to change from how much does something cost to whether or not we have the budget for something, whether or not we can fund this project, whether or not we can make this investment. At the highest level, if you're talking to the C-suite, really the only math that matters is the ROI. And this is where you want to get to at some point in your career as you start writing about different content, having a better sales process, and improving the way you write proposals. The biggest mistake I made earlier on, maybe in the first 3 or 4 months of the business, was just spending too much time with unqualified buyers, right? And these are the folks who maybe come in for your blog posts just have a bunch of questions they want to answer, but they don't really have the ability to allocate any funding or any kind of budget to paying for your services, right? And again, that's going to be a function of what kind of content you write about and who you're targeting. And again, remember that your goal for this content is not only teach, but to demonstrate expertise. And this is a slightly different in how we think about writing content, right? It stops becoming how I can do this thing or how I did this thing, but it becomes how you can get some value out of solving this problem. How can you do it in less time and less effort? And we'll talk about the value equation a little bit later on. But the idea is that you want to demonstrate enough knowledge that you can actually help them with the implementation and the execution of whatever plan or idea they have in mind. And the best way I think about doing this is using the AIDA formula, right? And what the AIDA formula says is there are 4 variables that you have to capture in a specific order as you write content. The first thing you have to do is you have to get their attention. Does the title and the intro attract the attention of the reader enough for them to stop scrolling on Hacker News or stop reading? Then you have to give them information, right? Can you actually prove that you know something? If I stop to read something, you have to reward me with some kind of information. Can you identify the problem that your reader has and outline the solution? So this is usually what I think most technical blogs get up to, but what they're missing is the last piece of desire and action. Not only can you create some desire in the reader to solve their problem, you can also create some call to action to specifically say, book a call with you. And I'll give an example of how I did this with this lightning talk. So again, the call to action is going to be booking a call, it might be joining the newsletter, but we basically want attention, information, desire, and action. And for the majority of the marketing for this lightning lesson, it basically was this: how I went from $170 an hour to $100,000 a month. That basically gets your attention because you don't know how this happened. Then when I share my background about the hand injury and the companies I've worked for and how I think about pricing and structuring, then you can go, okay, maybe this person knows what they're talking about. And then the last thing, I don't know how many people here came in from the newsletter or through Maven, but the idea is that if you want to learn more, given what I've told you, if you want to learn more about how to scale your business or charge for your expertise, join the newsletter, sign up for the lightning lesson. And that's a simple example of how we think about using the AIDA formula in our writing. But that just demonstrates your ability to understand the outcomes. I think another part of demonstrating your expertise and being valued for it is also demonstrating your ability to be an oracle. One of the best ways I think about pricing now is I just ask the customer, okay, if we were to work together and we were able to solve this problem for you, what would be the return on investment? Like how much would your business be able to benefit from this solution? And then they'll maybe say, you know what, I think we're going to be able to raise like a $20 million round. Maybe the product is going to make us 10, $20 million. And then you can come back and say, okay, what percentage of that would you be willing to pay to make that more likely? 1%, 2%? 1% or 2% of the final outcome is still such a large number that we're not even going to have to charge that. If 1% of the return on investment is $500,000, a $50,000 engagement is very cheap, right? But this is, again, because we're comparing it to the outcome, but also what we're showing is that we're able to lower the variance of this outcome. And being an oracle is a way of doing that. In your writing, I would also challenge you to think about what are the problems I can help you encounter in the future, and what are the problems I can help you avoid? What are the mistakes you're guaranteed to make if you don't change course? And how oftentimes will someone read a blog post a little bit too late, and then you're able to give them this "I told you so" moment? Right? One of the great things about writing is it's one thing to answer someone's question as they talk to you during the initial sales call. It's another feeling to go, oh, this question that you have today about something you're worried about in the future, here's something I wrote about 6 months ago. And usually when they see that article, they basically look back at me and go, man, where were you 6 months ago? I should have hired you 6 months ago. This would have saved me months of effort with a team of 5 or 10 people. This is way more than any number that you're going to be asking me for. And as long as you understand what is at stake in their business and what is actually costing them money, you want to start comparing yourself to the ability to reduce the variance. And then once you can do that, they basically have this feeling of like regret of not having hired you earlier on in the process. And then they can start asking questions like, when do we start and how can we charge? And again, it's going to be a function of your ability to reduce the variance and the risk, but also your ability to understand actually what they're looking for. If you think about building a house, it's one thing to be thinking about like laying bricks as quickly as possible. But if you start comparing it to the cost of tenants moving in 2 months late, the cost of that revenue loss is so much larger than just being able to say, I lay bricks like 20% faster than everybody else. It's a different ballpark in terms of how we're comparing our abilities and our leverage. One of the best ways to think about not only how you should give an offer to somebody, but also how you should think about writing your own content is through the value equation that Alex Hormozi came up with. And what it says is that the value you can deliver to anybody is equal to the dream outcome times their probability of success divided by the time and the effort it takes to get it. And so a simple framework that you can use to think about writing is, what is the dream and can I write about understanding that final dream? What is the probability of success and how can I demonstrate that I can improve the probability of success? Having testimonials, having references, having big logos on your website, those are all in the domain of probability of success. Then you can start thinking about, how can I write content about how to make it faster, right? How can I make it less effort? And once you start writing offers and writing content that capture 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 of these variables, that's when you get stuff that really goes viral or closes well. And I want to give a very simple example of that. So imagine you're like a gym and you want to sell a membership. Or maybe as a service-based industry, because we're experts, maybe you're a personal trainer. So a really bad offer or a bad blog post or bad anything could be, we have weights, right? It says nothing about the dream outcome. It just says we have some kind of thing. That's like me saying like, I worked at Facebook. The entire comment was about me and not what the customer wanted. But if you say, get your dream body, now I'm slowly communicating what you're looking for. If I say, get your dream body in 6 weeks, and now I'm giving you a time constraint, you know what you're signing up for. If I say without changing your diet, now you say, okay, not only can I do that, I don't have to increase my effort when I do this. And then once you add like your before and after pictures, now you go, okay, not only do they understand that I have a limited amount of time and I'm not willing to change my diet, I've seen other people get the same results, right? And this is not only how you should think about writing your blog posts or your proposals or your case studies. This is generally how you want to present offers to the customer that you have. And this works not only for services, it works for startups, it works for businesses, it works for everything. And ideally, this makes a big mindset shift in how businesses think about your own expertise, right? It goes from, my team can Google and research and solve their own problems, to basically not having enough time and wanting to unblock them as quickly as possible, right? goes from my team can figure this out and maybe I don't need your help to how much does it cost somebody to be stumbling for 3 or 4 months and feel like there's low morale because progress is slowing down, right? And then what happens is instead of going from a cost center, instead of going from how much Jason costs, it becomes what am I going to get out of this? And can Jason help me de-risk the project? And does Jason understand that what I'm really looking for is this specific return on investment, right? And if you can do that, then writing proposals and charging more becomes much, much easier. So I want to tell you another story around accountability and thinking about pricing. So earlier I said the first job I did was like $170 an hour. It was a little bit embarrassing because they had said yes so quickly, but slowly I started just increasing my rates. And by, I would say, April, I was charging about $700 an hour. And to me, that felt like an amazing amount of money. I couldn't believe that companies were willing to do this. But companies were willing to do this because what I was doing was I was doing job interviews. I was hiring for senior AI engineers and VPs and head of AI. And so I knew this was very important for them. And what happened was I charged on inputs. I basically said, I will do interviews for you, and as long as you put me on interviews, I'll keep charging you money. And by the end of it, I basically earned about $30,000, which again felt like an incredible amount of money at the time. But what I realized was after talking to the team that had done all this hiring, the recruiter made 5 times more. It turns out that the recruiter charges on outputs. What they say is they hire somebody that they find, they take 25% of the salary as long as the hire stays longer than 3 months. So what they've described is they actually know what the company wanted. The company did not want more interviews. The company wanted to hire the team. And what happened was I didn't really understand what was at stake. I didn't ask the good questions, and I didn't really understand how I could be responsible for the biggest dream possible. And ultimately, had I asked, the answer was to build a team and the reputation to raise a Series B. And what happened was we hired the team, we found the head of AI, they raised a Series B. Like I was the person that ended up being paid the least across this entire project because I was only thinking about the inputs of doing these job interviews. Whereas I should have tried to leverage my social network to find better talent. I should have been making introductions to investors. I should have been trying to figure out how a better roadmap could lead to closing stronger candidates that might have just gone to OpenAI instead. But then you might ask, is the answer just to charge more? Do I just ask for $14,000? Do I just ask for $50,000? Not exactly. I think the ultimate goal is not just to ask for a larger number, but to be more accountable for the success. And ultimately, your ability to get paid is directly proportional to how well you understand their final dream, your ability to demonstrate control over that value equation, and how you can demonstrate accountability for that success. And all this you can practice through writing, right? And the idea is that the act of writing not only gets you leads, but it is like the wax on, wax off moment to figuring out how to do sales and to write proposals. And this is a line that I basically got from like a $600 book on pricing, which is you should price yourself like an airline instead, right? If you price yourself like a commodity, if you're just selling your labor, you will always be treated as a function of your labor. You will always be treated like a commodity. Instead, if you price yourself like an airline, you have many options. You can show them what economy class looks like. You could show them what first class looks like, but you should always show them what like a private jet looks like. And it does 2 things. As you're charging more, you can collect more of the interest and more of the accountability for success. But also, this is just another pricing tip, the private jet price anchors everything else, so everything lower, it feels much cheaper. And I'm going to give you a feel of this basically at the end of this. And the idea is that like both the jet and the economy class gets you from point A to point B, but the level of service and who you are as a customer and your willingness to pay is completely captured. My mistake of just offering this tiny band of 150 to 170 an hour meant that if they wanted more work from me, if they wanted more accountability from me, I didn't even give them permission to ask. And you should always give them permission to pay more money, right? And if there is a service that you think could be higher and you're unwilling to do it, chances are what's happening is you're just not charging enough for it. And more, you should always believe that there is actually a price where both you and your customer will thank each other once the work is done and once the money is exchanged. If you think of a simple example with maybe like an agency, right? Maybe an agency can come back and say, oh, Jason, they want me to build a basic demo. The basic demo might be $20,000, it might be $40,000, maybe that's economy class. But if I knew that your goal was to not only make the demo, but to make the demo in a way that could help you raise a seed round and recruit technical talent and to convince investors it was a good product, that's not where it stops, right? Maybe first class could be not only building the demo, but doing user interviews and building out test suites and also hiring out a software team. Maybe first class, so maybe the private jet is not only hiring and training the software team, but going out and doing your recruiting, right? Maybe it is speaking to users and building this thing out. And maybe if you're a big enough agency with a big enough brand, you can start making introductions to different investors, or not only that, but help you find like the VP of engineering. All these things are within scope as long as you are not treating yourself like a commodity, right? And you can do that by asking a couple of really good questions and building out what I like to call the situational assessment. If you understand what the objectives are, if you understand what the metrics of success are, and what the values and outcomes of this, you can present your customer a sliding scale of accountability. And I'll give you a very specific example that ties directly with the material that we're covering. Like on my website after this call, I'm gonna just email everyone with like my actual like free little like document of how I think about situational assessments. But we're gonna go over a live one during this call, and mostly through the format of slides versus a document. But the idea is that once you start working and writing these documents, not only is it better for the customer because they have an understanding of what you know, but it also helped me personally understand how to change my own limiting beliefs. Because I'm someone who is like very uncomfortable with charging people anything. Like I just work for free for often way too long. But through the situational assessment, just demonstrating how much you can help somebody and how much they're willing to thank you afterwards has really changed my own perspective on this. So let's just jump into that. And specifically, I think it would be fun and a little bit cheeky to do it through this lesson, right? A month ago, I decided to create this material to practice what I preach and also to figure out and just talk to more people who are running into the same problems as me and to attract a community of like-minded folks. So I said, okay, I'm going to build this out. And the first thing I did was I revamped a lot of my AI consulting content. I had about 6 blog posts. They talked about the tools I used, the pricing mechanisms I had, how I think about marketing, whether or not I want to show my price on the website. And all this content pulled into a newsletter. Like if anyone was like coming in through the newsletter, if you just like reply newsletter in the chat, I would love to know like what percentage of people came in through the newsletter versus through like the Maven website or through Twitter. But what I had done is I had a CTA that pulled people in a way where the call to action was subscribe to the newsletter, right? The second call to action was subscribe to the Maven page. And by doing this and just by creating this content, you're building out your proof. Then I just shared all of my embarrassing stories of just every time I didn't charge enough money, like every time I lost a customer. I'm sure people have seen a bunch of these. And I provided a bunch of different tools. So the newsletter built proof. I provide like proposal examples and contract examples to help more people. And all of this is effectively the AIDA formula, right? How I scaled my business. This is what I did. This is what I did. If you want to learn more, check out the course, check out the newsletter, etc. And this kind of puts you in that mindset of the thought leadership. Hopefully, just by attendance, it worked. Then I just started helping people out for free. I basically took about like 20 different calls. I worked with different folks, and I got a bunch of testimonials back out. So this guy, Shaw, I think he's like in the chat, now has a plan to go from $5,000 to $20,000 a month. Another friend of mine, his agency business went from 40,000 MRR to like 120,000 MRR. And really, I helped him build the confidence of increasing his prices. Amar increased his monthly income by 50%. And a buddy of mine who works at a larger agency, this is crazy. He was going to quote $500,000 for a 6-month project, but ultimately quoted $1.2 million instead, and it was accepted, right? I can't take full accountability for that, but even 1% of that as a kickback would have been great. But the idea is that I did all this work in the beginning to build out the flywheel, build out the funnel in order to start thinking about doing things like sales and nurturing, all that kind of stuff. And so the idea is that once you build out this network, now you can think about starting to do sales. And the questions you should ask during the sales process are the ones I have listed out right here. These are my favorite questions to ask. So the first question is just what's at stake for you? Why now? What do you think is the ROI? And what are you willing to invest to make that more likely? And the last question I ask is, if we meet up a year from now, what are we celebrating, right? There's a very little chance that if I really help you out, that if you meet me at a party a month from now, a year from now, you're not going to introduce me as the person who just is on Twitter. It might be, oh man, Jason gave me the confidence to quit my job. Jason helped me double my income, right? Jason let me double my income and then half the amount of time I'm working, and now I just have a healthier lifestyle. That's what we want to celebrate. And the question would be, how much would that be worth to you? And this is how you want to start thinking about selling your services when you think about having the situational assessment. And so this is very cheeky. Maybe this is not the right thing to do, but I'm basically going to write a situational assessment as if I was doing pricing consulting. So as a disclaimer, I don't actually do this. So I get people emailing me about this. I won't be doing this in the near term, but it is like a very fun idea and a very fun exercise to show you, because I'm sure some of you will actually be interested in a service like this. So maybe I talk to you and I figure, okay, this is what you want. You really want to just have the ability to quit your job and go independent. And you want to be able to make a living while building out some SaaS AI products. And this is actually what I write in the assessment. This is a Notion document, and the first thing is just situation. You are this. If you can queue up a few clients and make a few sales, you'll have the confidence to quit your job and move forward with being independent. And if you can hit your first $90,000 of revenue and you can break even, then you're good. You're currently charging $100 an hour and you want to move to larger ticket projects, and you're struggling with marketing. But you have a few great projects under your belt from your day job that can help you get started. So notice that this is how this is structured. None of it is about me yet. It's all about what you want and me telling you what you want. And then you can go outline objectives. In order to do this, you're going to need a couple things. You're going to build a landing page, book your first 5 or 6 calls, come up with a content strategy, grow your social media, collect testimonials, and ultimately shift from hourly to value-based pricing. Metrics could look like getting your first 5 blog posts out or 5 calls, and ultimately hitting your $90,000 target in revenue. And if you can do that, you can build out a nest egg while you work on your SaaS product. You'll have the freedom to travel and the ability to scale up and scale down as you need it. So now all I've done is I basically told the customer, look, this is what I know you want. This is what needs to happen to get you there. This is how we can measure it. And this is how your life is going to be different after we work together. This is what we're going to be celebrating. Now we can think about the products and the offering. This is the airline. So the bus might be the newsletter and the lightning lesson. They're free, right? But if you just follow those along and you just reply to some of the emails I send you, I will answer back and I will help you when I can. The Maven course is like economy. It's 3 hours of lectures, 3 hours of office hours. We're going to go over things like your landing page and content strategy and the tools I use. We'll talk about pricing and all this other stuff. You're going to have access to a community of engineers to collaborate with, and we'll help you review some of the work that you're putting out. But this is where things could get much more interesting. What if I had a direct coaching service? Maybe on a bi-weekly basis, we just do an hour together. We talk about all the issues you're running into, and I can help out when I can. I'll introduce you to other businesses that make sense and other professionals. And then the private jet could look like everything we talked about above, but I will literally sit with you and review every sales call. I'll help you write proposals and review blog posts. I'll introduce you to my writer. I'll find you potential collaborators and promote your content and drive leads from my business if it makes sense for my business to work with your business. Right? So now I'm showing you a spectrum of how I can do it. Read my free blog post, check out the course. Maybe we should do a weekly one-on-one. Or I will literally help you as much as possible because what I know you want is $90,000 and the ability to quit your job. Then we can go into pricing. Because as you build out this model, what you're really doing is you're asking, what do I get first? And then what does it cost second, right? Because you could say, here's a bag that's $500. Do you want to buy it? That's a very different feeling than saying, this bag has 25 kilograms of gold in it and it costs $500. That's the shape of the conversation I want you guys to be having in order to be able to charge more. Great. So I tell you what you want. I tell you some of the ways to get it. And now I'll tell you what is the investment you need to make to get those results. This newsletter is free. The course is $750 and it's 25% off during the promotion. The coaching might be $3,000 a month. And maybe you can throw in some kind of discount if paid up front, if cash is something you personally care about getting up front, right? And then the comprehensive is where things get really interesting, right? I think it would be very fun to build a business where I just get 20% of the incremental income over the current hourly rate of your business, right? And again, this isn't real, but you could imagine that if I just said there was no fees and all I collected was 20% of your incremental income over $100 an hour, exactly, very clearly that I know what you want. And I want the same thing as you. Because if you are making $90,000, I want you to help you make $500,000. If I can help you get the confidence to make $2 million, like I will be rewarded and you will still be very happy about it. And that's the idea. That's the feeling I want you to be able to give the person you're working with. It's I know what you actually want. And to add to that, to de-risk much of this work, because you can, and this part is real as well, both the Maven course and the coaching is guaranteed. Because I know what you want. You want to make more money. So you can say, you know what, my work is guaranteed. If you feel like you do not increase the revenue in a way that can offset my fees within 3 months, I'll return your entire investment. Now it's just a matter of whether or not you think you're actually good at your job. But that is something you should play with as you figure out how accountable you want to be for success. What does that success look like? And I'll just say one thing before we wrap up, which is a lot of people will come back and ask me, oh, what if I can't get the result? My answer would be, if the result is that hard, you should still be charging way more, right? Because that's just, again, how that's, there needs to be a price where both of you guys thank each other. And I think that's, again, the thing that I want you to think about as well. If it's too risk on, it just means that the expected value is not high enough, in which case you should be charging more, right? You can imagine a world where I could ask for $200,000 if you raise your Series B, but maybe 80% of it is once you raise. Now our incentives are completely aligned, right? Whether I take 9 phone calls or 1,000 phone calls, it doesn't matter. You know that I know what you want. And so this is basically what I do with businesses, right? I give away all the alpha and I only charge for the implementation. And as long as you can demonstrate the understanding of what you think the final outcome is, you can capture a percentage of that outcome. But you can only ask for it if you know what you want and you can tell them what you want. And this is, again, why writing is so important, because everything you write about is just practice on understanding what the outcome is and what the ask is. And so for the remainder of the actual Maven course next month, the goal is to basically figure out how we can work together with all of the class cohort to review proposals, navigate these conversations and follow-ups, and more specifically also share things like specifically on how I think about writing, the Claude projects that I use, and all the workflows and the tools that I leverage so I can create as much volume as I do. Again, the past year I've basically written 60 blog posts, and I would say the top 4 have driven like $300,000 worth of inbound, right? It's just because, hey man, I read this blog post, I totally understand what you're saying. I do not have time to be paying my engineers to be like deciphering 60 blog posts. Can you just help us out? And that's the feeling I think I want your customers. Yes, alpha means info. And that's basically it. I won't go over too much of the details of the course itself, but the idea is that it's in the same structure as we talked about today. All the tools and all the secrets for writing, all the information on how to change your mindset and think about hourly to value-based pricing, and then sales and proposals. And I know this is very dense, but this is, I think, only 40 minutes. But the general idea is that the course will be very dense and it'll have a lot of hands-on experience, and I hope it's something that will be worth your time. And if you can't make money after the course, I'll totally give your money back. Yep, and then I'll share the slides after this presentation. And that's all. I would say, yeah, this is the QR code for the newsletter, and then this is the QR code for the course, and then I will share the slides in an email afterwards. So let me also jump into Q&A now.